Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, earlier in the week, a little tiny piece of the Russell Westbrook trade market went away, and on Wednesday, another piece went away. It's going to get a little harder to move the fella, as we'll discuss next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, no matter how you get your podcasts, where you get your podcasts. Always free, never behind a paywall, always there for you. And if you subscribe to Locked On Lakers on YouTube, you get a crack at the podcast generally a little earlier, especially on non-game nights. So Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Cam Brothers. All the breaking news and stuff like that. Want to let you know that Locked On, the network, is partnering with the Arcade 1-Up to give away 3 free NBA Jam Shack machines. Stay tuned. Later in the show, we will explain how to enter. Again, Arcade 1-Up.
That's pretty sweet.
It's really sweet. It's really, really cool. So we're going to start talking a little bit about free agency. Some interesting lists from John Hollinger at The Athletic have come out. We'll talk a little bit about Austin Reeves. But Andy, we made a note that earlier in the week when Oklahoma City and Denver made what sounds like kind of a minor deal. Oklahoma City sort of absorbs JaMychal Green, takes a better first-round pick for their troubles. It had a bigger impact probably on the Lakers than it did on either one of those two teams, because it took Oklahoma City kind of functionally out of the Russell Westbrook is an option business. Another little chunk of that trade market disappeared on Wednesday when Dallas acquired Christian Wood from Houston.
Yeah, Christian Wood last year, people may remember, right around the trade deadline, beyond the rumors of Russ and a first-round pick for John Wall, who had essentially been paid to not play by Houston. There had also been some rumors about an expanded trade that would involve maybe the Lakers including 2 picks, but they would get Christian Wood and Eric Gordon. But Christian Wood had been linked to the Lakers in a couple different ways. He also, beyond the Russ of it all, Christian Wood had been linked to the Lakers as maybe a possibility as somebody that you would combine THT and Kendrick Nunn, maybe a first, depending on what Houston wants, because they would be getting young players in that scenario. Mm-hmm. But one way or another, he had been linked to the Lakers, whether specifically with Russ or as a potential trade target. And now that's clearly off the table.
Yeah, and look, Houston still has, guys like Eric Gordon. They've got, it's not that the Rockets, I guess, become completely removed from the potential trade market in one way or another. I mean, they're obviously not going to be competing for a title next year. And so the idea of absorbing Westbrook, if it was worth their while at either cutting him or whatever it might be, doesn't hurt them next year if they can move off of things or get picks or get assets that they can use down the road. So I would say this one is less impactful, certainly, than the Oklahoma City trade, which really did have a pretty big impact on the Lakers. But it's just on the downside, I would say it is another sign of how tricky this is going to be to get done, because the other teams aren't going to sit still. And while you can construct trades that kind of make sense from the Lakers' perspective, it is still hard to construct, from the other team's perspective, it's hard to construct deals where it makes the most sense for the other team to do something with Westbrook. And I think that's really the issue. It's not that it can never make sense, but it's got to be the best available option for one of these other teams.
Yeah, I think also, too, it underscores how difficult it's going to be in a lot of respects for the Lakers to make trades, period. Mm-hmm. Just because they have, right now, not that many players on the roster, but they also have very few guys of notable salary, not including for the time being LeBron or AD. They're not considered a part of this conversation. So you're looking at Russ, you're looking at THT and Nunn as the only guys that don't make league minimums. But then if you thought about, say, that scenario of THT and Kendrick Nunn and maybe a first for Christian Wood, beyond what Houston would think of it, the Lakers would be cutting their depth even more. You know what I mean? Like it becomes even more, unless you think Christian Wood is so much better and more productive than what you would get from THT and Nunn combined. Forget about the
Mhm.
pick, but just that he would be a better fit with AD, a more productive guy, more versatile, whatever, that you could offset theoretically like the loss of the fourth and fifth best player on this team, fifth and sixth, where the depth drop off can
Well,
become pretty dramatic.
sure.
It just underscores that the Lakers, in a lot of different ways, do not have a ton of flexibility to try to get better. Doesn't mean it's going to be impossible, but it just means Rob Pelinka's work is
Uh-huh.
exceptionally cut out for
And
him.
it's funny, like you mentioned that like it's does Wood exceed the value of THT and Nunn? It's really Wood and I guess the next two minimum guys or something like that you'd have to sign, because they would replace that roster spots with something. And if you think the answer is yes, and in this particular case, do I think that Christian Wood equals something more than a player of Christian Wood's caliber, equals something more than THT and Kendrick Nunn combined? I would say yes, because I think functionally you're going to get something at a higher level than sort of the added together kind of amorphous value on a night to night basis. I think a Christian Wood caliber player would make them better than Nunn and THT, who are closer to the guys that would replace them on the open market. It's just my opinion.
I don't know
Um,
if I agree, but I understand why
right.
you think that.
And it's sort of the distance between and that's not, it's particularly not a good thing when you're talking about THT, that you think he's closer to the replacement level guy, minimum level guy, young player that they would find somewhere to come in and play for him. I will say this: if you're looking for a little bit of optimism, Wood didn't cost a ton. One essentially a late first round pick,
And
um,
a bunch of filler.
and a bunch of filler, and Boban, who I think we deserves more respect than that. Phenomenal actor. Um, maybe that means that not necessarily Russ gets more appealing, but that you might be able to find teams, like you might be able, maybe somewhere in there you might find that the price for useful players could be a little bit lower in some ways this offseason. I'm not sure exactly how you get from point A to point B there, but I'm just saying Christian Wood is a caliber play. Now, the reason he's available is because he's going to be a free agent after next season and he costs a lot more money. Houston's not going to sign him. They don't want to they get value for him now. But just as a caliber of player, he's better than a 26th pick. That's not even a moderately controversial opinion. So we'll get to some free agent stuff. Some of those preliminary lists are coming out. We'll talk about set the scene, Andy, with what we believe to be our greatest list of needs. Like, what exactly should be the Lakers' approach as we start getting into that part of the off season? But next, let's land on something healthy. Great feature from Dan. Something healthy. Did I say healthy? I meant happy. Great feature from Dan Woike in the LA Times last week. It was, I believe, on Austin Reeves. We haven't had a chance to talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about him next.
Okay. Built, they're always coming out with these amazing new flavors, and they've come up with another one, Mud Pie. They've got the Mud Pie Bar and the Mud Pie Puff. And if you are a chocolate fan, this is going to be the thing for you. The new Mud Pie Bar. It's got whipped cream, chocolate mousse, 100% real chocolate, always covered in 100% real chocolate, and topped with a cookies and cream crumble. You got to try this as soon as possible. It's going to be available only for a limited time. So go to built.com, taste this for yourself. And as always, the people at Built, they've come up with something that is low calorie, low sugar, high protein, only 150 calories, only 8 grams of sugar, but 16 grams of the protein. That is the good stuff. It's going to taste great as always. It's going to taste like your mom baked that great mud pie from your childhood, baked it just for you and made it healthy because your mother cares about you. She wants the best for you. She wants that collagen protein that your body actually absorbs more efficiently. Like all mothers, your mother wants you to be yoked. It is the perfect snack for a workout, a late night treat, or just a quick bite. Again, chocolate mousse, whipped cream, cookies and cream crumble, always covered in 100% real chocolate. So go to built.com, order your box with the mud pie bars and the puffs right now. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCK15, 15% off at built.com.
All right. So earlier this week, Andy, Dan Woike of the LA Times wrote a great feature on Austin Reeves. Talks about his upbringing on a farm in Arkansas, and it kind of goes back with Austin to the farm. And there's like pictures of him with cows, and like he moos at them, and like to get them to like go from point A to point B. And like he is undoubtedly one of a small handful of happy stories from last year, almost universally loved among Lakers fans. And if you liked Austin Reeves before, you will like him even more after reading this feature from Dan in the LA Times. But what stuck out to me, and I think this is a really great sign for the Lakers in terms of him not being a flash in the pan and really developing into a useful player consistently down the road. He's got a lot of that same thing that Caruso had, that other players kind of like that have been underestimated have, where like they appreciate the attention, they understand kind of the jokes and the their own sort of goofiness, whether it's Caruso with the hair, Reeves with the accent and the body type and whatever. But Austin Reeves made it pretty clear, like his motivation is to tell everybody who said he wasn't good enough to bleep off. Like he said the word, and Dan didn't write it. I think that is really good. Like there is an edge to Austin Reeves that was present with Alex Caruso and guys like that who have developed into legit NBA players.
Yeah, a guy like Gary Payton II with Golden State. He's got a lot of that. I highly recommend, by the way, Sirat Sohai from The Ringer wrote a really good piece about Gary Payton II and the journey that he's taken. I didn't realize until listening to Zach Lowe's podcast, the Low Post, during, I don't know if it was the pregame or the postgame or whatever, Malika Andrews from ESPN dropped this nugget that Gary Payton II was actually on Golden State's radar and in their building initially because he was applying for a video coordinator job.
Right. He didn't want to go back to, he was so determined to not go back to the G League that he wanted to stay around the team. He was willing to be a video guy.
Like that's insane. And, first off, you grow up Gary Payton's son, you're going to have an edge. But secondly, just there's a certain hardening of character and psyche that is really required to be one of these guys that does this thing from an undrafted position. But also, too, you were talking about, Austin Reeves having this, I want to tell everyone to bleep off attitude. Austin Reeves in high school had a ton of success. Like he was part of state winning basketball teams. He comes from a basketball family. Both of his parents played high-level college basketball. His brother plays overseas, and they were on the same high school team together. They played against Malik Monk, the Arkansas boys. That connection, or at least the introduction began there. These are guys that get a taste of this stuff, and because they get that taste, they really resent the idea of, okay, if I wash out, I wash out. At least give me the chance to wash out.
Well, and also too, it's like I'm not a sideshow. Like I'm here. It's I get it. It's cute. The Caruso and the headbands and all that stuff. And like they're self-aware enough to understand like sort of the stereotypes and all that other stuff. But don't forget, I'm really good at basketball. Like I'm not here as a little sideshow to make everybody happy.
And I'm here to make you laugh. I amuse you.
Right.
Tell me what's funny about me. Right. Tell me what the bleep is so funny about me.
I'm not the halftime show. I'm here to play during the game. And I, the comparisons between Reeves and Caruso are laughably obvious in certain ways and lazy, but there really are a lot of connections in terms of their attitude that you see there, and the development of Caruso as a slightly older player who really has found a niche in the league. And I'm not saying Reeves is going to be the same as Caruso's, but Caruso really did go from fun fan favorite curiosity and quasi joke to dude who earned a big contract with Chicago and played a huge role in their success this year.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what Reeves will be, but as his body gets a little bit more developed for the NBA game,
which it really needs to be.
Which it really needs to be.
For all of his defensive intensity and willingness, and I think instincts, he would get targeted a lot. And at times, or you would hear a lot over the season, that was him being underestimated as both a rookie and, a kind of goofy looking white rookie at that, and teams having not done their homework. And I think to a certain degree, Brian, that was true. But it was also the idea of, if you can get him in a one-on-one matchup and body him at all, you're going to win that one, because he is not strong enough to win those matchups.
Or at the very least,
would
that's the best way.
Right. Well, he would get murdered on screens regularly. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's fine. This isn't being critical of Reeves. These are things that younger guys, or if somebody like Reeves playing his first year at this level, these are things all these guys go through. But to your point, building up that body will make him a much better player at the things that he already is starting to do well.
Yeah. And so when he's 24 now. So, he's not a young,
just turned 24.
Right. He's not an old man in the league by any stretch, but he's also not one of these, 19-year-olds who comes into the league and, the upside is probably limited in certain ways. But I will say this, I would be very surprised if Reeves doesn't become a valuable high-end role player, particularly on a good team. If the Lakers or someone else can unlock him in ways and put him around good players who are also smart and understand systems and do that kind of stuff, like they've got to do it. And just it's just an appealing story and a good place for the Lakers to be, where you can feel reasonably confident that, yeah, this is a guy that you can put into your rotation next year. He's not just somebody who was a success story last year because they had bleep else to put on the floor.
Yeah, I don't totally agree with you, or not to the degree you believe it, that the upside is more limited because of his age at 24, because typically guys that are 24 in the league, when you start thinking about them that way, they've been in the league for 3-4 seasons. So you've had a better idea of what they do at this level. This is his first year having played against NBA guys. Case in point, Alex Caruso didn't really start playing at the NBA level regularly till he was older than Austin Reeves, or certainly the same age. And Alex Caruso has made dramatic improvements.
I think you know what it is. I think some of it is I'm defining this like people talk about young players. Oh, they're really good as a rookie, and they have a chance to be a star. They have he could develop. Like, I don't think Austin Reeves' upside puts him in like all-star category. He's not going to be that guy. That's what I'm getting at. Like you have to temper your expectations because he's a rookie. The rookie improvement isn't going to take him from, oh wow, surprise, good role player to, fringy all-star kind of player.
I would just temper your expectations because he was an undrafted rookie. How many stars start from an undrafted place? I mean,
but if you're going to do it, you're probably going to do it from 19, 20, 21 rather than 23, 24, 25. Statistically speaking, it is very unusual for players to blow up in that way. But if you're talking about Caruso-like improvement, where you go from surprise to like excellent role player, that's essentially what I'm talking about. If you want to call that categorize that kind of upside differently. I think that's totally fair then.
The other big thing that just jumped out at me from Dan's piece, and again, people should read this at the LA Times. We already knew about, Hillbilly Kobe,
Mhm.
emphasis on hillbilly. You read this story, you realize just how hillbilly an environment that Austin Reeves grew up in. Like Newark, Arkansas is a small town in a state that is considered sort of, one of the benchmarks for hillbillydom. Like, a few years ago, we interviewed Billy Bob Thornton. He talked some Arkansas with us, and I believe he referred to himself as a hillbilly during the interview. Newark, as of the 2020 census, population of 1,180. And Dan's piece made mention of a local pizza place that's just referred to as the pizza place. That's what it's called, the pizza place. I actually looked this place up. It's 10 minutes away from Newark in a town called Oil Trough, Arkansas. I discovered the locale. Looks not bad. Look, looks like a
There you
nice
go.
little pizza
It's the
joint.
pizza place.
Food is dirt cheap. So if you're ever going through Arkansas and you need a cheap bite to get back on the road, I guess the pizza place would be good. Some of the Google reviews seem to be all right. But just like it cannot be overemphasized just how small town Austin Reeves is. Like even by country settings, that
Oh,
dude
but you know
grew up
what?
in small town country.
So next, let's take a look at their biggest positional need, which I think both of us agree is small forward. At least to me, ties back a little bit to the Westbrook situation and what a trade might possibly, maybe, kind of, sort of look like, and how that what kind of creates the idea of a good trade. So we'll get into all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Arcade One Up. Boom! Shakalaka, the one only NBA Jam. It is back. Arcade One Up, the leader in home retro arcade games, is not only bringing back the best game ever, NBA Jam, they have made it even bigger with a Shaq edition. Again, we are talking about the same NBA Jam you grew up playing as an arcade rat back when you had to leave your house to go play video games. You hang out with your friends playing NBA Jam, which remains an awesome game. One of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed team. No fouls, no free throws, and now no quarters required because you can compete with friends and family through the all-new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade, the number one, up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade One Up is the place for fun. They've got the classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat. Oh, I love Mortal Kombat. And many others starting at just $3.99. And they are giving away an NBA Jam Shaq edition to a Locked On listener. It could be you. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave with arcade1up.com/locked on. That's arcade, the number one, up.com/locked on. You've got till July 8th to enter to win an NBA Shaq edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today. Who are you going to play with?
What, Andy, would you say is the Lakers' biggest need this offseason?
They need some wings, Brian. They need some wings. In terms of what you would add to the roster, let's remove the question of what do you do with Russell Westbrook? We know the answer is you trade him if you can get a good deal. That's a separate question from whether or not they will actually get one. In terms of what they would seek out separate from the Russ question in terms of trying to make this team better, it is, in my opinion, undoubtedly wings. Guys that can play the 3, maybe the 3-4, but around in that area, hopefully defend and shoot, but at least one or the other fairly well.
So what you're saying, Andy, is it's important for the Lakers to reverse their trend of the last few years where they seem to aggressively try to avoid acquiring anybody who fits that bill.
Yeah, it's been an approach. Admittedly, they won a title with it in 2020, but since then the returns have been more diminishing. And when you look around at, say, the two teams in the finals right now, Brian, you know what they have?
They got
Wings. They got some wings over in Boston, over in Golden State. They got them some wings. Milwaukee, they got them some wings. Milwaukee's always really good. Like, start to pick up on these trends. Phoenix has wings.
So John Hollinger over at the Athletic has some kind of preliminary lists out about who is going to be available at a bunch of different positions, free agent rankings, and projected amounts of money that everybody's going to make. And when you look at the wings, Andy, there's some bad news and there's some good news. Which do you want first?
Hit me up with the good news first.
The good news is a lot of the players that are out there and are free agents, projected free agents, aren't going to be very expensive, or
Okay, well,
theoretically aren't going to be very expensive.
that sounds terrific. What's the bad side of that,
They're
Brian?
not very good.
Mm.
Yeah, and which is why, in part, they don't cost a lot. The best name, the guy that Hollinger's formula expects to get paid the most among free agents, is Bruce Brown.
Or this actually, to be clear, this is
I'm sorry, it's what his formula projects as their sort of value in
their
the league.
value. It's not his
Right.
prediction of what they will get paid.
That
It's
is
very
fair.
important to make that distinction.
No, but it can be kind of used as a rough guide of what, their worth might be around the league. And I think he is right when he looks around and he sees somebody like Bruce Brown, who is, relatively young, 25 years old, pretty versatile player, good defender, does a lot of stuff, kind of dirty work on that Brooklyn team, as the guy who is probably the most appealing player on the list as a small forward. You get into guys like Nick Batum, Kelly Oubre, Gary Payton II is on that list. It gets really journeymanish very quickly. Josh Jackson, Troy Brown Jr., Danwell House, our old friend Wes Matthews, Rodney Magruder makes the list.
I forgot that dude was still in the league. I had no idea he was on Detroit.
People who probably call him McGruber, just because they kind of forget. Timothy Luwawu Cabarro. These are fringy type players. And so on the one hand, the Lakers might be able to grab 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys on the minimum market, but it's going to be really difficult to sign a free agent that really elevates where they are on the wing. It's going to be really hard. Those guys just aren't out there.
Well, I mean, I think what really makes it difficult is it's not even so much that those guys can't be useful players on a good team. And we just saw, for example, Wes Matthews played an important role with the Bucks as a defender and as somebody that can hit outside shots. And both of us, I in particular really thought Wes would be back this last season. I was very surprised that the Lakers seem to have no interest in it, because Wes, more than any impending free agent from the 2020-2021 team, was outspoken in, I want to be back. There was no ambiguity about it whatsoever. Wes was like, I want to come back. I want to help this team after what we thought was a disappointing season. I think we can do better. And seemingly the Lakers weren't interested at all. But the problem, I think, with somebody like Wes, or even some of the better guys that were named there, maybe even a Bruce Brown, is I think those guys are going to be most valuable in structure. And it's still up in the air at best exactly what that structure's going to be for the Lakers. Some of these guys, if they're asked to just, like with KCP during his best season with the Lakers, you ask him just to fill a very specific lane because we got other guys who can do other things we don't want you doing, KCP. We just want you to do these 2 or 3 things extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
That's when KCP thrived. I don't know if the Lakers are going to be able to put some of these guys in the position where you can really get the best out of their somewhat limited but still tangible skill sets.
Well, look, I think that's going to be, that's true of, I guess, anybody that, any limited players require a setup where their limitations can be protected as best as possible. Sure. And their strengths can be accentuated as good. And look, Darvin Ham, before he even started talking about the stars on the team, was talking about Stanley Johnson and Austin Reeves. And he will take a deep interest in the role players on this team. And I think the coaching staff, as I'm sure last year's was too, will be dedicated to trying to figure out where their strengths are and getting the most out of it. The thing about Matthews, both literally and figuratively, that is tricky is you can point to something, the veteran qualities and the defensive know-how and all that other kind of stuff. He's also 36. He's going to be 36 by the time the season starts. And I think, last year's experience showed that maybe you can sign one Wes Matthews. You can't sign four of them. And you have to finding people who are, smart enough, savvy enough, have the IQ to give you what Wes gives you, but still have the athleticism, the health, the other kinds of stuff. It's a really difficult needle to thread. And what to your point that you were just making, this I think is one of the biggest challenges the Lakers have in the offseason is taking all of these guys who might have one or two good qualities about them and a bunch of other shortcomings and stitching it together in a way that you can make all of it work when all of these guys are going to be sort of the last dudes available when the music stops. They're all going to be looking for bigger contracts. The Lakers aren't going to be able to be choosy because they are literally the beggars here. And so, it's going to be hard.
Well,
it's going to be really hard.
I mean, here's two things that I think are really important. First of all, THT, Kendrick Nunn. We talked about them earlier in terms of guys who had been linked to Christian Wood last year and are the two potential trade pieces the Lakers have not named Russell or Westbrook that constitute anything in terms of potential value, if for no other reason than their salaries. It's really imperative that those guys, A, stay on the court. Talk about Kendrick Nunn did not play a game last year. And B, play at the level that the Lakers really have hoped that they could last year, certainly this coming year, because those guys playing well creates more structure for the Lakers. It gives more opportunity to, whether you're talking about some of these guys on this list or on Austin Reeves or Stanley Johnson, to play more in their lane.
Yes.
To actually thrive and help the team.
You won't be asking a guy who should be your eighth man to be your fifth. And
right.
That's a huge difference.
And then also too, somebody like, he wasn't on the list of small forwards for John Hollinger, but he was on their shooting guard list, but he actually has the size of a small forward. A guy like Amir Coffey, who is restricted for the Clippers. He's young. He's just coming off a two-way contract. He's still unproven, but seems like he's moving in the right direction. Maybe if the Clippers decide after some of the moves that they've made that they're not going to be spending on a guy like him, maybe you get somebody like an Amir Coffey at just the right time where their breakthrough was going to be happening anyway. And the timing works out well for the Lakers. They may need to be looking for guys like that they feel like, he's about to pop. Even if it requires maybe a little bit of overpayment or whatever, we really think this dude is about to take that next step. Let's have him do it here.
Well, the lesson of last year is very much you're better off taking a shot on 5 or 6 of those guys than trying to recycle Kent Bazemore, Trevor Ariza, even Melo to an extent as the season went on, because he was asked to do too much. There was a diminishing return there. So the lesson is throw your darts at the young guys with upside rather than the old guys because you think you're a championship caliber veteran team and you're thinking of the finals and finals experience. That's not going to work this year. I do want maybe for Friday's show, we'll get into it. Talk a little bit about how like this thin small forward market, for example, impacts the potential for a Westbrook trade and what you might want to get back and what will be considered a good trade. But we will get to that maybe on Friday. I do want to remind listeners that we have the listener survey out there. Anybody who completes it gets a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. It really helps us at the network understand what you guys want in the podcasts on the network, so you can help us out there, maybe win something along the way. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to do that. Again, lockedon.com/survey. Also, too, the first picks of the Ultimate NBA mock draft have been made. Search now for the Ultimate NBA mock draft. Get over 50 insiders to break down what's going on the draft as we head into that in what is that, like 10 days away, 8 days away, something like that. Yep. Yeah, so make the Ultimate mock draft your second listen of today of your Locked On podcast, and we will see everybody on Friday.